We've all heard it, right? Put your head down, work hard, and success will follow. It's the promise we're sold from day one. But what if you're doing exactly that? You're putting in the hours, you're giving it your all, and you're just feeling stuck, stressed out, unrewarded? Well, today we're going to pull that promise apart and figure out why your hard work might not be paying off. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at that promise we're all sold. Then we'll get into the big picture stuff, the systemic headwinds that are working against us. After that, we're going to zoom in and talk about the internal imbalance that leads to burnout. And don't worry, we'll wrap it all up by giving you a new way to think about your own equation and find a smarter way forward. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's talk about this core belief that pretty much drives everything for so many of us. It's a really simple and honestly a really powerful idea. You know this formula. It's everywhere, right? In graduation speeches, on corporate posters, in the stories we tell our kids. It paints this really clean picture. The more effort you pour in, the more success you get out. It feels fair, it feels straightforward, and best of all, it puts you completely in control. But here's the big question, the one we're here to unpack. What if that's not the whole story? What if effort is just one piece of a much, much more complicated puzzle? What if there are other, more powerful forces at play that make that simple formula basically obsolete for a whole lot of people? To answer that, we have to zoom out. We have to look at the structure of the game that we're all playing. Because, this isn't about blaming ourselves, it's about understanding the field itself. The entire hard work promise really hangs on this one concept: social mobility. It's that idea that no matter where you start in life, you can climb the ladder. It's the belief that your talent and your effort are what matter, not who your parents are. And this is where things get, well, pretty sobering. That ladder we were just talking about, it turns out it's getting a lot harder to climb. According to some pretty serious data, that ability to move up is worse now than it has been in over half a century. The rungs on that ladder are getting further and further apart. Just let that number sink in, 94 times. That's not just a small advantage. That's a monumental, almost game-breaking head start. It shows you, in stark numbers, that not everyone is starting the race from the same line. And it's not just about what school you go to. It's way bigger than that. The data is pretty clear. Things that are totally out of your control, like how much money your family has, or even just the zip code you were born in, are becoming some of the biggest predictors of where you'll end up in life. So the takeaway here is pretty straightforward. The system we're in isn't a pure meritocracy, where only the best and hardest working win. Look, working hard is absolutely necessary, but it's not always enough. You can be running as fast as you can, but if you're running into a hurricane-force headwind, your effort alone might not get you there. Okay, so that's the big external system. Now let's bring it back home. Let's zoom in on our own personal experience. Because even when the opportunities are there, just working harder can become its own kind of trap. I think a lot of us have felt this one personally, right? You're putting in the extra hours. You're taking on more and more responsibility. But instead of feeling rewarded and successful, you just feel drained, completely wiped out. So why does that happen? Well, the answer is in the psychology of how we relate to our work. Turns out researchers actually have a name for this exact feeling. It's called the effort-reward imbalance model. And it's a super useful way to understand why work can sometimes feel so toxic. It's not just about how many hours you work. It's about whether the deal you're getting feels fair. Think of it like a set of scales. On one side, you have effort. This is all the stuff you're putting in. The crazy deadlines, the pressure, the long hours, the constant interruptions. Then on the other side, you have reward, all the stuff you're getting out. And that's not just your paycheck. It's also respect, recognition, job security, a path forward. When that scale tips way too far to the effort side, that's when you get chronic stress. This visual really nails it. When what you're giving consistently outweighs what you're getting, your brain registers that as a broken contract. It's a deep, fundamental sense of unfairness. And over time, being in that state of constant distress can lead to some really serious health problems, both mental and physical. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. There's a third piece to this puzzle, and it's called overcommitment. This is the internal part. This is us. It's that voice in your head that tells you always have to do more, that you can't ever switch off, that you're desperate for everyone to approve of what you're doing. This mindset basically makes you pour gasoline on the fire, accelerating you down the road to burnout. Okay, so it's one thing to understand the problem, but what can we actually do about it? Let's get practical. This next section is all about turning that knowledge into a tool you can use, like right now. We can basically boil down that whole complex model into 3 simple but really powerful questions. And if you ask yourself these questions honestly, you can start to figure out exactly where the imbalance is in your own life and start to fix it. First things first, let's get real about your effort. Look at these questions. This isn't just about how many hours you're at your desk, it's about the quality of those hours. Are you constantly putting out fires? Does it feel like the goalposts are always being moved further away? Take a minute and actually tally up what you're truly giving. Next up, let's take a hard look at your rewards. And I mean all of them. Sure, the salary is important, but that's just one piece. What about esteem? Do you feel valued? Respected? And what about the future? Is there job security? Are there actual opportunities to grow? You gotta look at all 3 of these. And finally, we gotta look in the mirror. This can be the hardest one. Ask yourself honestly, are you driven by this intense need for people to tell you you're doing a good job? Do you find it basically impossible to unplug and stop thinking about work? Recognizing if you have this overcommitment tendency is a huge first step. So we've looked at the rigged game on the outside and the psychological trap on the inside. So where do we go from here? Well, it leaves us with the power to take a new, much smarter approach to our work and our lives. Here's the big takeaway. The old advice to just work harder is broken. The new goal is to work smarter. It's about shifting from blind effort to what this slide calls intelligent navigation. That means being aware of the system and making strategic choices. It means demanding a fair trade for your precious time and energy. And it means managing your own internal tendencies so you don't burn yourself out. You're no longer just a worker. You're the architect of your own career. Look, this isn't about giving up or becoming cynical. It's about wising up. It's about realizing that your effort, your time, your energy, it's an incredibly valuable resource. You now have a framework to see if you're investing it wisely, or if you're pouring it into a broken system that's never going to give you a fair return. So the only question left is, what are you going to do about it? The choice is yours.